By being the center of their own educational journey, they are able to make strides that people made assumptions they could never make. We've got kids that are discovering whole depths to who they are as a person simply because they're being given the time and resources that they need in order to communicate who they are deep inside.
What would it look like if school had room for students with all kinds of different abilities, all in the same place, in the same room? What would that teach everyone? Let's find out. Woodland Star International right now. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Global Student Voices, and I'm your host, Scott Martin, and I'm very excited to be here with a couple representatives from Woodland Star, Heather and Rory. And as we get started, want to hear a little bit about your background, why you're at Woodland Star. This is a kind of a new feature for us. We're doing a series this year on international schools and kind of unique attributes of some of the international schools and some of the cool things that are happening. Woodland Star definitely fits that bill. So, but let's start with some introductions. Rory, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll hear from Heather.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so my name's Rory Parkinson, and I'm the head here at Woodland Star, and I've been here since August last year. I ended up here after 25 years in education, and came across the school in 2019 when I was working in Uganda. And some friends had some children at the school, and even driving up to the school all those years ago, I thought, this is a stunning part of Kenya, a stunning part of Africa. And the school was just incredible from the moment we walked onto the campus and interacted with the students and the staff. And my wife and I, when we were driving away, my very own two kids were like, I hope one day we can come back. And I won't bore you with the long backstory, but yeah, we're delighted to be here and enjoying everything. It's just really special about Woodland Star.
Yeah, so I'm Heather Adkins. I joined Woodland Star about almost 3 years ago, and I grew up here in Kenya. So I have known about this area of Kenya for a long time, but the school became something on my peripheral when my nieces started attending. I have a niece who's neurotypical and a niece who's neurodivergent. And I just love the fact that the two of them could be at the same school together and really just be engaged in their school world in the same ways. And so when I was looking to move into administration after 21 years in the classroom, I saw a post for the assistant head of school here. And so I applied, and I was really grateful that I was able to come home for a little bit to be with my nieces at school on a daily basis. And so, yeah, so it's kind of how I ended up here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool to get to see family in that walking greeting time in the morning when you're high-fiving students as they walk by, and then get to see your nieces like that. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome. Rory, you also grew up, you have an international background that led you into international schools. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so family's originally from Zimbabwe, and I grew up around Africa as a child. And then probably because I was causing too many problems at home, my parents sent me to boarding school at the age of 8 in the UK. So hence the British accent, which I've been trying to shed ever since, but not managed to, even at this age of 49. Yeah. So, and then, but also before that, yeah, when I was about 6, I was in Nigeria at an international school there. So that was my first experience sort of in an international school. And then later on in my career, yeah, after leaving the UK, going back into Africa, we worked in Zimbabwe and into Uganda and on to Ukraine and now back into Kenya. So yeah, I love the continent, love international schools. I love the diversity, the mixture of nationalities and the rest of it. Yeah, it's very special, and feels very familiar territory, both in the sense of the type of parents and students that are involved, the richness, the diversity, the depth, the breadth, and everyone's just got a fascinating backstory on their lives.
That is one of the things that probably isn't recognized by a lot of people when they think about international education, is that each family has their own story, and they're so unique and so inspiring and challenging.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that makes Woodland Star really unique is how families who've found challenges haven't been able to have their kids maybe together in school, like your nieces, can be there together, and how special that makes it. Tell us a little bit about, I think that's one of the things that makes Woodland Star really unique and special. Um, and tell us a little bit about how that's living out day to day, like just how it is to have um, such a range of students and students' abilities all in the same classrooms.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things about my journey to here is that having taught in a lot of international schools around the world, thought I had this real definition of inclusive education and really sort of understood that on a superficial level. So I found out. And I think that that's one of the beauties of Woodland Star is that we do have such a broad range. And a lot of families that come to us are families that haven't been able to find placement in other schools and other international schools in particular. And so what we are providing is the ability to meet those needs, no matter what background they're coming from, no matter what educational level that they're achieving. We are in general able to to meet most people's needs, and so I think families have found that when their kids are enrolled with us, that there is this blossoming and flourishing of their child because they find acceptance and belonging. There is other people in their classroom that have similar needs or have very different needs from them, but they are able to empathize with each other. They're able to see how getting support is not a shameful thing, but that it is actually growing them and building them into to better students, but just better people and people who are involved in a community that really values and embraces true inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, empathy is one of the things that as educators we talk about, as humans we talk about, as parents certainly we think about a lot, wanting to develop that and how important it is for flourishing for humans to have developed that their empathy quotient. Um, and I think that's one of the things that, I mean, obviously it's wonderful for families who find an inclusive space for their kids to learn, but the fact that everyone who comes to Woodland Star, whether it's students or staff or visitors, um, level up on their empathy. I think it's unavoidable, and I think that's really special. Um, when I was just recently in Kenya with you guys, and one of the things that in meeting with parents is, one of they, it's really, first of all, it's just really hard to be an international parent. It adds a level of challenge to parenting that um, I don't we don't give those parents enough credit for. Um, and what are you seeing as you're interacting with parents? What are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges they're facing when they're looking at school options for their kids, trying to figure out what's best for them um, in your setting?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's definitely challenging being a parent of two kids myself. And we've lived in many countries and many houses, and I think for them this is about the 12th house they've lived in, and they're only 16, 17, and I think it's my 25th house. And I think the word flexibility is probably a big one. I think a sense of identity. I remember myself growing up as well. It's that famous question that I know you guys are going to both smile at this one. Where are you from? And it's like, oh my goodness. It depends. If I'm at a social event and I've got a bit of time, I think, okay, I'll give you my long answer. But otherwise, I just shortcut it and just go for the accent. I just say I'm from the UK and just don't tell them anything else other than that. I think as a parent, it's getting a sense of identity, and particularly through those teenage years. I think that's really important because I remember myself as well. It's a confusing age to be, and if you're not even in a home country or you're living in a confusing environment, and yeah, I think that's a challenge. I think the other thing that causes some attrition is sort of change of friendships as well. You sort of, the risk I've found for myself is I can just have superficial friends because I'm like, I don't want to go deep because it's just too painful. Because I'll be saying goodbye to you in a year or 2 years or 3 years. And sometimes I joke with other families, if I know they're leaving in about 3 months, I'm like, I'm sorry, I haven't got time to get to know you. So I'm going to prioritize someone else for my barbecue, my braai that I'm having coming up. So I think as a parent, I think, yeah, you want a place where they're going to feel secure, where they're going to feel known. And I think for Woodland Star, that's the great strength. It's not a large school, intentionally not a large school, never will be a large school. It's not about being this huge institution. It's about, as Heather was touching on, being known, being know who you are, being accepted for who you are, and it is the most inclusive school I've ever been involved in, and I've seen a lot in various roles, many schools around the world, and is by far the most inclusive place. Um, so I think for parents that they get many that get that when they come on campus, a lot of parents are immediately blown away by not only the environment and the beauty of where they're at, but the fact that the students are known, the staff know the students, your parents know each other. And as they say, it takes a tribe to raise a child. And I think this is a wonderful tribe and a wonderful community part of. And we do that together. We can't do it as individuals. And we each bring our own strengths, and ways of bringing those students out. And I've already seen it this year. There's one student in middle school who used to just hide. I won't give too much detail because I want to keep them anonymous, but I've just seen them blossom in a sense of their own confidence and being seen and having a voice where before they didn't have a voice, and they would have easily been lost in any large school. So I think, yeah, it's the size of school, it's the location, it's the ethos, it's the inclusion. Those are many of the hallmarks that I absolutely love, and what draws many of us as practitioners to Woodland Star.
Is there, Heather, is there a story that maybe comes out that kind of exemplifies that school culture, what's unique about Woodland Star, or something you've seen in your 3 years there?
Well, I mean, as somebody who's worked in education for over 24 years now, I have rarely seen, you're touching students' lives, you're engaging with kids. You have rarely do you ever get to see what happens beyond your classroom, with their lives, and how they're actually, how you've actually impacted them, if you ever know you've impacted them at
Yeah.
all. And I would argue in the last 3 years since I've been here that one of the most beautiful things is to watch the number of changed lives that you get to see straight up. I mean, it's a big challenge, what we're doing here. It's not an easy path that we're walking. It is very personalized, very individualized. But I would argue that because it's so individualized and so personalized for kids, they are able to be the center of their own educational journey. And by being the center of their own educational journey, they are able to make strides that people made assumptions they could never make. That we've got kids that are nonverbal, that you're discovering whole depths to who they are as a person simply because they're being given the time and they're being given the resources that they need in order to develop the skills that allow them to communicate who they are deep inside. And I think that's just one of the most powerful things for me as an educator, is to be this far into my career and still be seeing something new, to be seeing the rewarding stories of lives changed. And it sounds idealistic in the way that I'm spinning it. I'm not saying there hasn't been the challenges, the speed bumps, the things that require you to embrace failure, embrace flexibility. But as Rory mentioned, that seeing a child flourish in the way that we do see here, quite, I almost want to call it regularly. That is why we do what we do here, because that individualized and personalized attention, is not wasted. It is, you're not spoiling a child, you're not challenging them. You are bringing them actually uh, to a version of themselves that they either didn't know they could be at themselves, or they were underestimated by the public. And I think that's the beauty of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's really special. Um, I think the in some people's minds, or at least I imagine in their minds, they think that somehow, in order to be this individualized and in order to be this diverse, that something must suffer, that must be watered down education, because you're focused on the social side of things and must water it down. Um, my observation, as somebody who just pops in from time to time and gets to see highlight moments, um, I think about the nerd night that I got to experience when I was there, and hearing, you know, the entire class be up in front of an audience in a coffee shop and sharing from their passion an articulate 6-minute presentation that I think captured not only their personality but their interests, and they did so in such a professional, high level. I mean, I hear parents muttering, "There's no way I could do that," and certainly would never have been asked to do it in most school settings. Um, do you have a sense of how is that possible? Like how can you be like an elevated rigor while being that diverse and while having uh, as much diversity in learning styles and capacities and all of that? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think one of the things that struck me when I first looked at the school in depth was, just the staff-student ratio. It's by far the highest staff ratio to students I've ever come across. And in a lot of schools, you'll have sort of your homeroom teacher, and then you'll have a teaching assistant who's great. And I think, for example, when that came into being in the United Kingdom, it was a great addition to the educational setup.
Pardon the interruption. Thanks for listening to this episode of Global Student Voices. We're glad you're here. We try really hard to provide good content for international school leaders, parents, and students. But to know what you want to hear, we need to hear from you. So please reach out and let us know what you'd like to hear next. Now, back to the show.
I remember reflecting on it through that season many, many years ago. But having another co-teacher who's also fully qualified as well, and also in special education, as well as being educationalists, they bring just such a depth and breadth as well as the homeroom teacher. And those two working collaboratively together, that's really, I think, what's the secret sauce? I would say there's lots of different secret sauces in the school, but I think that's definitely a brave decision in regards to the administration. I can't take any credits before my time, and also for the people behind the school. They have a passion for education, they have a passion for Africa, they have a passion for raising the next generation of individuals and leaders that are going to impact this world. And I think that is what brings capacity to the school. And then those students that do have the extra needs, then they have one-to-ones support as well. So it's people, when they first come, it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of adults around here. But the reason is it just ensures, personalized education is just it's used too often. It's lost. It's been diluted over the years, I think. But if there's any educational institution I've been in where I can really see that's happening day to day, minute by minute, day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, I would say it's definitely here. And I think that's how it's achieved. And you just don't see it elsewhere because, for state schools, it's too expensive to do that. For private schools like ours, I was part of, I won't mention their name again because I don't want to knock their name, but, part of a very large international educational private equity funded setup. And they would never let us do this because you're not making the bottom line for them, And that's the difference here. I think, the focus and the philosophy and the culture is about education, about delivering what is needed for each and every student that crosses the threshold into Woodland Star. So I think that's what makes it really possible. I'm sure Heather has some other angles as well that will elaborate further into it.
Yeah, so I guess I would add, we've got a really strong support in adults and then help with personalization. But as you know, we are mastery based and we are project based learning. And I think the strengths of those styles of instruction and that style of assessment really come out when you look at a school like ours. It does seem like, how is it not diluted? How are you not focused on the needs? How are you not focused on the variety in front of you instead of how does personalized work? Does it become diluted because all you're doing is meeting the child where they're at instead of pulling the child, up and out? And I think that misconception is huge. I think that the idea of personalized doesn't mean that you're personalizing and taking away the rigor. What you're doing is actually adding in the tools to reach the same standards that everyone else is reaching. You are finding the interest that a child might have and helping them to pursue that through skills building, instead of focusing on a date or a fact over here. You're focused on helping a child to pursue the skill sets that they will need through a project and helping them to identify, I am not strong at this. This is the thing I need to be working on. I'm really great at this, and I need to continue to use this to help build my educational journey as I'm moving forward. So I think there's a strong misconception that because we don't do exams and we don't have, an external structure that we are working with, that we can't possibly deliver the same kind of concrete learning that some of those structures say they deliver. Although I would argue at times, I think you've said it actually to me before, where you're learning to study, you're not learning to learn. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to show kids what it means to actually learn something, apply it in a real world setting or a real world way, so that it sticks with them, and so that then they take that on to the next task that they're working on, or the next project that they want to tackle, or the next passion that they have and interest that they have. So I think that, to me, alongside of a very bold model of 2 teachers per 15 children, that's bold. And I think that type of boldness is what it's going to take to meet the needs of the kids that we're working with, and to meet the needs of this next generation. And I also think that, that personalization is more in a world where information and facts are just available everywhere. That type of personalization helps to build the strengths of an individual, so that they can use all that information in the most appropriate way for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would go so far as to say if you're still teacher centric in how you're delivering content, then this would be impossible. It would be a disaster. But when you're student centric, as you guys are, and it's really built around the student experience, that's it's a lot of magic ingredients. It's like way more than KFC number of special spices that make up Woodland Star, but among those, yeah, you've highlighted really well. Heather, I wanted to touch on one thing. Running out of time, but I wanted to touch on one thing. You guys have begun to collect some of this information, some of your experiences, into a magazine that you're now sharing out with other schools. And so I think that's a wonderful way for students, for other schools, to be able to access this experience. And I know that this is a conversation that's happening across schools and across systems everywhere, but the practical, how would we do that, you guys have put into a beautiful format. Tell us a little bit about that, and how somebody who's listening here from another school might be able to gain access to that resource.
Yeah, so the idea for the magazine really grew out of a desire to share what we do. Part of our mission statement is not just about the kids, but to actually build Kenyan teachers into strong educators in this style, as well as beyond the borders of Kenya to all across Africa, and and obviously around the world. And so, that being our lofty mission, I think that you have to find ways in which that can be captured. And it's very easy to let a year go by. And I was grateful that I've been in some schools that have really great, strong magazines. And so we sat around and we talked about the idea of putting together something that could be from the different voices of our community. So we would include stuff from students, from teachers, from external experts that we work with, such as yourself, and from parents. And we just gather that together and then share that in any capacity that we can. So we do have our issues online. So if teachers are looking for it, or educators are looking for it, they can actually go online and find that. But we are excited because it does give people a voice for what's different. It's easy to get bogged down in the difficulty and the challenge of educating this way, but this is an opportunity for us to celebrate the things that we know are working, and we know we're doing well. It's an opportunity for us to hear from our kids and from our parents about the things that they're proud of and the things that they love about Woodland Star as well. And it's also an opportunity for us to share ways in which other areas of education are moving forward, such as your group, Global Student Solutions. How are you guys helping move forward this type of movement in education? How your wife Angie is working with technology to try and move technology closer to this type of education. So it's also an opportunity for us to pull those voices in. And really, what comes out is a magazine that focuses around the celebrations of this style of learning and this style of educating that I think get lost in the story, and we're able to highlight those for others.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll make sure that wherever you're listening or seeing this, there'll be links in the description. You can get access to that resource. Rory is the last. We give you the last word. That's what the head of school always gets, the last word. Um, if this is a family that's listening in and they're like, "Wow, this sounds pretty cool. We got this wonderful green space, this beautiful setting, this kind of ideal. This, like, why wouldn't I want my kids to go here?" What's your word to them? Why should they choose you over some of the bigger name schools, or just in choice? What makes this a unique and special, um, as a parent? Why choose Woodland Star?
Yeah, I think we touched on quite a lot of it already, to be honest, Scott. So I'll just use my own children as an example. They've been fortunate. I tease them because they've had about a decade of international baccalaureate. They've had 2.5 years of intense British GCSE education. And if I could boil it all down, I would say a couple of things. I'd say it's a love of learning is one thing. So my own son, who went back into the UK and walked into the GCSE setup, and had to cram his way through his exams. Just watching him lose his love of learning. He did really well. He got half his grades were equivalent of sort of A star and the rest of it. And he's a bright kid, but the cost was great. And I've seen that over the years across all schools around the world. I think it's all well and good, to get into the goal of, being educated. But my question, as a parent, is at what cost is that achievement made? And watching my daughter, just pivoting across to my other child, she again had a similar sort of education in the IB and then to the GCSEs and the rest of it. And at first she was quite sad about walking away from the GCSEs. She'd got halfway there and like, Dad, I'm losing all this work that I've done. And, thankfully her credits transfer. But, just watching her blossom, talking about children sort of growing, since she's been here. And it's more than just the educational experience itself. It's the friendships, it's the socialization, it's the inclusion, it's the families, it's the environment we're in, it's the passion of just the beauty of being on a 100-acre space and all those things. And for me, so it's more than when you go into a school and have a look around the school, I think not only look at just one dimension of what's the grades they get. I've worked in the schools that get the highest averages in the world, some of them, and to me it's not a great school necessarily. Is my child coming out of school and do they have the empathy? Do they have the compassion? Do they have the critical thinking? Do they know how to work with all sorts of people? Do they have the flexibility? Are they known? Are they valued? And is it a safe space for them to blossom and to flourish? And I think Woodland Star has that in spades and buckets. It's just such a special place. And just watching her just shine increasingly day in, day out and growing from strength to strength is validation for me. And I could go on and on, but I would. I think you'd be absolutely crazy to not come up to Stigoni, come and have a look around our school, meet the team, meet the children, and meet the parents. And I'll be shocked if it doesn't impact you or change you in some way, as it did for me all those years ago when I came across Woodland Star.
Yeah, well, I think that's a perfect conclusion. Thank you guys for taking the time to share with the world what's the great things that are happening at Woodland Star. We wish you obviously all the very, very best. It's a challenging time in international education, particularly in Kenya, but you guys are up for the task, and it's fun to get to watch you guys steer the ship through the troubled waters with those kids in mind. So thank you. Bless you guys in your work, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Great.
Thanks,
Scott. Take care.
I'm so grateful you stayed till the end. This was a great episode, and I hope it was really helpful to you. Again, we'd love to hear your feedback, but we also wanted to make you aware of some of the other ways that you can connect with Global Student Solutions. Global Student Voices is a service of Global Student Solutions. We also provide books and resources like you see behind me, as well as a variety of other services, educational content, and consulting. So we would love to connect with you. And at the very least, if you can follow us and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We also have a membership a program coming up, and we'd like you to be the first member. So let us know, get your name on the list, and we'll make sure that you're the first to join the membership community. Thank you, and have a great day.